So welcome everyone. My name is Paul Zelizer and I'm a co-founder of Wisdompreneurs. We are so glad to have you here on Wisdompreneurs TV. We have a wonderful show today planned with Nick Jenkel. We're in the UK, talk about conscious business and conscious entrepreneurship over on the other side of the pond. We're so honored to have you here, Nick. We're
Thank
going to
you.
start with a moment, like all of our shows, we start with a moment of mindfulness time, and then we're going to do a check-in. You will hear in about 2 seconds a beautiful bell from Tibet that I want to share with you all. And we'll sit for a minute, just gather up our thoughts so we can have a collected, centered conversation. So welcome, everybody. So again, thank you everyone for joining. If you're listening live, feel free to type in your name and where you're from. We'd love to be able to say hi. And you'll see a chat box over there. You can just go ahead and type in your name there. And we're here today we've got Selena Poole, who's usually behind the scenes helping us with the technology, but Allison Raby, the co-founder of Wisdompreneurs, wasn't able to make it today. So we've invited Selena to join us in the interview. Welcome, Selena. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And our main guest today, we're really, really honored and really excited to have Nick. And now, Nick, help me, am I getting your last name right? Is it Janko?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Nick Janko is really well known in the UK and is a leading conscious entrepreneur there. And we were talking before we turned the show on. I want to say hi to Marcia in Denver, Colorado. Thanks, Marcia, for joining us. We were talking before we turned on the recording, Nick, that you've been on this journey for a while, both as a wisdom teacher and as a wisdom entrepreneur, and sometimes those two things don't sync up so well. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get interested in this intersection of wisdom and entrepreneurship, and what's that interface between the two like for you now?
Wow, so I have to unpack that question into chunks.
Start right off with a big one, right?
So I was actually reflecting before I came on the call that my actual very first enterprise, which I started when I was 24, so that's 17 years ago, was actually really a wisdom-led enterprise. It didn't end up in that place, but its very founding ethos was around understanding the change in society from hierarchies to networks and what networks bring, and the joy of the internet-based models, business models or whatever. So I think I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was a medic originally, studied medicine and philosophy, and ended up falling into the dot-com opportunity really and going, wow, this is amazing what's possible today. I'm wanting to bring a more horizontal way of being into business and into the world. And then, cut a long story short, after about 6 years of that, I realized I was actually running a business that was totally not purpose-driven, not wisdom-led, not heart-led, because I didn't really know that was a thing even before that. I only found this out really through a very tough experience of burnout, entrepreneurial burnout, which I have reflected on at the time. I realized was more, I believe, a message from my heart saying what you're doing is not right for you, not for anyone, just for me. And that was really where I was like, okay, so first of all, I want to understand why I keep getting stressed out and burnt out and all that stuff. and I want to get to the root of that, and there must be something there that I'm not understanding. That's when I really decided that I wanted to get very seriously interested in wisdom, spirituality. And I've been an atheist up until really that point. But I realized something was missing from my worldview, my scientific worldview. And that was really where I became a wisdom teacher. And then I became a sort of social entrepreneur, would probably be the most, not term for me, for another 3 or 4 years. And then it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, so what I really want to do is be unashamedly putting wisdom at the heart of my business models and my offerings, whilst also teaching wisdom to other people in different ways. So that's how I realized that really the only thing I want to talk about is healing, awakened consciousness, transformation of shadow, and the becoming a whole. But I also realized as a businessman I wanted to make that available to many more people than currently can access it. So that's where my kind of disruptive scale, what I call the algorithmic mind, got interested in my organic heart's yearning for a more connected, loving, compassionate world. And so actually that in itself is quite a challenge, is to balance the desires for growth and scale and impact and revenue and investment, all these things that are part of the algorithmic world, whilst remaining centered, grounded, heart open, vulnerable, resting in the perfection of this moment without the need to change anything. And entrepreneurship is ultimately about change, and one could look at wisdom as being ultimately about perfection in the moment. So there's already a tension there to be explored and enjoyed in life.
Selena doesn't resonate with any of that. She's just over there saying, when can I get off of this call?
Yeah, I tell you, your whole journey of burnout and all that because your business and your work wasn't heart-led. Yeah, I've been there. I've done that for probably more years than most. Thanks for sharing that.
It's a wonderful phrase, the Sufi phrase, the heart is awoken by a blow. So that suffering is what awakens us to the desire to have no suffering, which then leads us into wisdom, enlightenment, consciousness, all that stuff. And I think a lot of people have learned in business to just try and switch that off, that suffering, and try and just bury it beneath business. And in fact, even today I was talking to another wisdom teacher, a generation older than me, who were working on a project, and this realization that we're about to pitch to a lot of investors, and this thought that there are a lot of investors I've met who have 2 caps, and one of them is the cap of wisdom consciousness. They've been to Esalen or wherever, and they've done inner work, and they've explored their shadow, and they're really into bringing more love into the world. And yet there's another cap, which is what's the ROI, and the standard investment cap, the VC cap. And what I'm trying to do with my work and my teaching is to bring those caps together and say, well, let's have one cap where we can do both those things and elegantly dance. I've yet to meet many people who are particularly in positions of power, who are financial power or establishment power, who are prepared to work through the greys, the 150 shades of grey between ROI on the one hand, maximum efficiency, maximum impact, maximum money return, profit, and maximum love, connection. And between those two things, there's just so much in there. And no one project's the same as another, and everything's different. But I believe that's the place for life to follow to. That's where all of us, I feel, are being pulled into, is that messy, chaotic grey in the middle. But what a trip. I mean, what an amazing lifetime to be alive in the world, to be able to even have that as a consciously understood and engaged space to work into,
Yeah.
I love that you're starting off with that, Nick, and that's one of my pet peeves, is that there's oftentimes a real disconnect between those two things, ROI and really skillful business and marketing practices, and really deep love and compassion and wisdom practices. You talk a lot about the shadow, and that gets me excited. What's What's some of the shadow of this sector, right? Let's talk about the thing that nobody wants to talk about, right? What's the shadow of the wisdom entrepreneur sector? You've been in this space for how long now? 16, 17 years, you were
Yeah,
saying?
16, 17 years, and then 11 years very consciously
Okay.
bringing these two things together, yeah.
11 years in the wisdompreneur space, and you've seen a few things in 11 years, right? Talk to us about what's the collective. Young talked about collective shadow. What's our collective shadow as a wisdom entrepreneur community?
Well, the best way I think I could answer that is to look at the shadow that I've been engaged with myself. Because if I've got it, it's pretty damn sure that other people have got it too. And I can certainly own, a number of things that have been, I think I'm integrating. So one of them is relationship to money, both our distrust of it and the kind of socialist dream of having no money, or a desire for it and a greed for it, and particularly if I'm going to be really poignant. And so I used to live in LA, and will probably be moving back to California in the near future. I find this a particularly American shadow is this idea, this what people call prosperity doctrine, which is the idea that if you're wealthy, God loves you, or if you're in the consciousness space, the universe loves you. Or the opposite of that is you're only really humble and amazing if you're poor. And a lot of wisdom teachers who are living in their car in California, right? So not a lot, a few. And so either of those things are shadow. They're story. They're not accurate understandings of reality. Money is a flow. It's agnostic. Likewise, marketing is agnostic. Likewise, social media is agnostic. All these things are agnostic. It just depends on what you want to do with it. So I've had a long journey clearing out my money shadow. And actually, for me particularly, I was more on I don't want money, I don't want investment, I don't want any of this stuff. And I had to clear that out, and that's been a journey. Power, I think another one I've had is a relationship to power that I've been working on, again, for years around people who can sign off on projects. People like a publisher, commissioning editor at Harper One or Penguin or TV company or an investor. So really not putting them on a pedestal, but also not taking them down either, just allowing them to be the people they are, and being powerful and strong with the person I am, and move around from this idea that people should love our work and appreciate it and think we're awesome people or whatever, just to understanding, is there a fit? Does it fit? It doesn't matter if it isn't. There's no right or wrong. It's just fit. Is just right now this project flowing? So that's another area of shadow, is relationship to power. And I think a lot of this personally came from me, from this kind of the radicalist meme that I don't know how I managed to be involved in it, but I've always been quite disruptive. I've been working disruptive innovation for years. I teach disruptive innovation, and I guess that's always fighting the status quo in its old guise of it. So I think a lot of the mind, body, spirit, human development space has come out of a little bit of the same meme of the radical 60s, 70s type thing. So there's something around not being able to love power and money, but not loving it too much. It's just accepting it as being, part of being. So those are two big areas, I think. I have to say, I'm going to just share an experience that really tripped me out. And it's only very recently I was speaking to a friend of mine in LA who was at the same event I didn't realize, and it tripped him out too, so I was really interested. So I was at an event in LA, in UCLA, and it was with all the sort of luminaries of the wisdom teaching space, and talking about changing the world, that kind of, let's turn spirituality into social impact, which is very much my thing. And we were sitting right in a corner by the side of the wall, and the guy bought me tickets. I didn't know the guy very well. He was a new friend. And I was like, why didn't you buy tickets in the middle of this room? Doesn't make any sense to me, because we're like really far from everything. He goes, those were like 50% more. And if we paid 50% more than that, we could sit at the front. And if you paid 150, you can go and meet Deepak Chopra or whatever it was, right? And I was like, really? Is that really, And I think, and my wife's American. I love America. There's a reason I wanted to live there, did live there, and I want to go back there. But I have to say that this shadow around always being another price. There's always another place you can get to that's a bit higher and a bit better and a bit more. Oh, you can't get onto that show yet, but you can get onto this show. Oh, you've been on Oprah. Yeah, there's this sort of hierarchy. For me, is almost the diametric opposite to the love, acceptance, and compassion of wisdom teaching. So that's, I think, a piece of shadow that exists a lot in this space.
Nice. Thanks, Nick. You talk a lot about the American shadow, and born and raised in the UK, and you've lived some in LA and some in the US. What's the difference you see, both shadow-wise and also just the whole sector in this wisdom and entrepreneur space? How is it different in Europe, or at least in the UK, and how is it similar to what's happening in North America and in the US?
Well, I was just having the same conversation today. There isn't really a wisdom enterprise space in the UK. Yes, there are obviously yoga studios and community groups and sort of positive chocolate bars. There are obviously businesses that are existing coming from some sense of wisdom, but there's not really a community around it, and it also feels very small. And I was reminded of our old business partner, that first business. He went off to Hollywood to make movies, and I went off to do this stuff. And he was saying that we love the British film industry, but it's really just not really even a business compared to America, because there's actually real money. And it kind of feels a bit the same here. I mean, part of one of my projects is attempting to transcend that, because actually there's lots going on. It's just hasn't arrived yet. And so the US centers around, the mountains, the West Coast, the East Coast, maybe the Northwest, are really, in some ways, very far ahead. Certainly in terms of ecosystem health, money, people, capacity, that kind of thing. But one of the things that Britain's always very good at is coming up with sort of big ideas in some kind of way. So there's some things that I'm involved with that I think actually can leapfrog what's going on in the US in terms of just size and scale and impact. But in a way they're harder to get off the ground because it's just not, the ecosystem just isn't there. We're tempted to develop one. One of my projects, a sort of, what's the word, industry leadership project, non-financially motivated, is a Wisdom Leaders Congress, trying to bring together certainly the younger people who are developing projects with wisdom at the heart of them, together regularly to start looking at collaborative potential and joining up dots and not overlapping. And I've spoken to Alison and hopefully to you now about, let's do the same thing in the US and Asia, so that eventually within a few years we'll have this network of wisdom leaders who've all got their own tribes, their own projects and communities. But I just don't feel there's enough money in the space to overlap everything. And we're all in this business for a reason, because we ultimately believe in probably one common goal, which is radically awakening millions of people, and all that stuff that comes with it. So whilst we can compete, obviously, fun, playful competition, I think there's an opportunity to really orchestrate our resources in a way that creates a much bigger impact than if we all use the standard entrepreneurship route, which is just lots of people doing their own thing and not joining it all up. Because we have a purpose, right? So we might as well use that purpose in a way that you don't get app developers doing, because they're all doing their own thing, right? And it reminds me of the 70s. I don't know if it happened in the US. There was a lot of adverts on TV for the milk. Did you have those in the US? And like one farmer on their own.
Did you have a milk mustache commercial? Do you remember those, Selena Ray?
Maybe they use them both sides. But it reminds me of no milk farmer on their own is going to do an advert about how awesome milk is. But 1,000 together can, and has a massive impact. Likewise, wisdom teachers, entrepreneurs, we're on our own. We are small. Together, we are potentially world changing. So. But as we all know, real collaboration, rather than talking about collaboration, real collaboration demands ever more clearing of that shadow, awareness of our defenses, our how sneaky our ego can be, even when we think we're being beautiful and collaborative, and actually our ego is positioning us and, you know, jockeying for whatever. So, but that's definitely the future. You know, that's where it's got to go.
Selena's
really,
bouncing in her chair there.
yeah, I know. It's like you're really speaking to my heart, because for many years I've worked with and been entrepreneurs, and just see each of us as bringing our gifts to the world, but doing 1,000 things that we're not particularly gifted at. And there's all these little silos of good happening, but there has to be a meeting place, a collective joining together where we share those gifts, and, you know, we're moving each other forward together. And collaboration requires capacity, and just what you're talking about, moving through our shadows and healing our structures and our systems, because, you know, it's not easy. I mean, I'm in collaboration projects with a handful of folks, and we're still in a hierarchical, very patriarchal system. And so how we make those little shifts is really fascinating to me. So thank you for speaking to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between collaborative way of working, which is relatively easy to be, sort of ask your freelancers for their input, and actual collaboration, or what I would call co-creation, when you're it's a meeting of equals who are going on a journey of development, creation, delivery. And again, this comes back to the lack of resource in the space, both in a resource and sort of financial resource, is that if people are hand to mouth, there's a lot of, it triggers, it's easy to get triggered into survival, into grabbing, into reacting. And so, yeah, that's definitely one of the challenges, is to get to a point where there's more resource.
Nice. Nick, if you were going to coach anywhere from, Selena and I both live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we have a initiative about bringing the wisdom entrepreneurs in New Mexico together and to do some collaborative things on a more local scale, right? How to make Santa Fe it's already got a brand, the brand Santa Fe. It's this place of consciousness. It has been, you know, the oldest continually inhabited building in North America is Taos Pueblo. It has this awareness of that this is a place where people come to do deep work, and it has had that. But there's a way in which we're coming together to deepen that and build on that. So just from one like community of wisdom entrepreneurs to like the whole idea of wisdompreneurs is like to sync that up globally, and like, you know, we have liaisons in Costa Rica and Bali and Hong Kong and all over the US, and, you know, we're talking to somebody in Greece, and there's somebody in Sweden, JP in Sweden. If you were gonna, from a very like local kind of how do we do that collaboration to like a global network, Alison and I look at each other like, we don't know how to do this. We're making shit up because like this is big, and we do have the benefit of some more higher leverage relationships than many because we were born at Wisdom 2.0, and Soren Gordhammer is a friend of mine, the founder of Wisdom 2.0, and Allison's connections. So we have more leverage connections than most. We both have 30 years of practice, and we look at each other and we're like, we don't really know how to do this. We're kind of making shit up as we go. What would you say, either a very local group or a wider group that's trying to figure out how to do that in a world that hasn't done that this well? What are some tips or some thoughts you'd want to input into a community that's thinking that way?
Wow, that's a great question, because I feel like I'm where you're at, which is I know I can see missing gaps, one of which is systemic collaboration and working togetherness, pooling of resources and talent and insights. I mean, some of the things I've learned, like Selena, I've had a lot of collaborations, right now working on 3 or 4, and have failed many. And there are so many things I've learned. Actually, so in my consulting work, I actually have tools and teachings on collaboration, because it's, for me, so insanely hard, amazingly enlivening and invigorating, and it's also demands consciousness without having to speak about it. So you can go into a company and just talk about collaboration, and you really have to do work with them on heart level stuff, because that's where collaboration goes wrong or right. And you don't have to ever use the word conscious, spirituality, wisdom, or anything, because it's like a wonderful way of going under the radar. So this is a great topic. I think some of the things that I am learning as we go forward is trust, 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 and more trust, and trust takes time. So where we've only really just met, we've both done a lot of work on each other, on ourselves. I'm pretty sure we could get to trust pretty quickly, like way quicker than you could with an average relationship that you have. But there's still just something around seeing how we work, knowing, understanding things, about each other. So I think trust is just the only thing that really needs to happen is trust. The rest sort of unfolds from that. And that means everything from doing what you say you're going to do, being clear with people when that's not going to happen, that kind of level of trust, and that deeper sense of, I genuinely know if we went into a pitch together and they wanted to give you the money, not me, I would be totally at peace with that and love you and think your stuff is amazing and just want you to succeed, which is actually one of the great 4 perfections, the mudita in Buddhism, which is something I've actually worked on a lot myself. One of my areas of weakness has been being able to see other people do awesome stuff and not be like, oh, where's my bit of it?
So where's my check? Come on, Nick. You're supposed to cut me a check.
The trust, we've all got our own journeys, trust, that whole sense of deep trust. I think another thing that I'm learning about is how much you have to communicate more than you think you do about the things you thought everyone kind of knew, got the vision and the story, and actually they don't have time, they're busy doing their own thing, and you just have to keep saying it, keep reiterating it, keep reiterating it. That's interesting for us. So at the moment we've got, in my big sort of, probably I hope my last big project in the world, my life's work, is a website called ripeandready.com, and it's meant to be a mainstream accessible place to get wisdom and consciousness stuff. So our strapline is wisdom without the woo-woo, and it's got many different strands. It's basically a TV company, publishing house. It's like Hay House and Vice magazine kind of rolled into one. Super open-hearted, and part of its model is to attract lots of what I call next generation wisdom teachers, who are not baby boomers, who have come from .com, the rave scene, Gen X, Gen Y, and so we've got about 40 people so far in our community of wisdom teachers.
What's the name of it, Nick?
Ripe and Ready. So ripe as in personal wisdom and ripening, which Rumi talks a lot about becoming ripe as a metaphor for spiritual awakening. And ready, and the ready is about doing stuff in the world, about social change, social justice, transforming business, not just sitting around, as I might joke, not just sitting in Mirren County thinking how wonderful life is, but actually taking some action. So it's a big project. So we've got these 40 wisdom teachers, and one of the things I've learned from working with them and sort of marshalling them is tell people over and over again what we're doing. Develop trust, meet, connect as many times as possible, which is difficult to do when everyone's short of time, is to keep meeting and keep talking, even though it sometimes can trigger that, where's the action plan type part of us. But just that trust, and it takes years sometimes for it to feel right. But the third thing I'm really learning, and this is, I think, something you spoke to, Paul, at the beginning of the show, is around making it clear that this project, your project, my project, our project, are themselves journeys of discovery and awakening, and we don't have the answers, and we don't know exactly how it's going to work, and we're going to mess up, and that might be irritating for people who are in the collaboration. But I found if we're really open, like painfully open, like not having any of that, as you're saying, the polish of, I've got my, stuff sorted out, my shit smells of roses and all that stuff. If we really go, you know what, we had this whole project, we got you to do all this stuff, and then we had decided we can't do it because something's happened, or we just realized it's not right for us. All these things which are really annoying and they're kind of flaky and all the things that happen. If you really openly share as you go along and make it clear that that's what's going on, it does really help. At the same time, if you do too much of that and don't have enough grounding and enough constancy and enough, this is going to happen, people don't trust that vision and that conviction, resolve. I talk a lot about resolve and conviction. Then people just don't want to follow the dream, and they get bored, and things unravel really quickly. A tool that I've got that I can send you, which might help. In fact, anyone who's listening or watching can have this, and I can find a way to post it on the web Facebook. I think of the collaboration engine. It's a set of 15 or 20 questions that I now send to everyone before I collaborate with them, which is about the things no one wants to talk about. So if I look at collaboration, it's a bit like dating. The first 4 or 5 dates, everyone's just like, oh, she's amazing, he's amazing, they're amazing, so beautiful, I just want to work with you, you've got this vision, it's all so sexy and lovely. And then, boom, shadow comes out. Oh, I messed up, I didn't call you. Oh, I inadvertently pasted your most precious details on the Facebook page, I don't know, whatever, right? And we haven't done enough of the due diligence, so we're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that when you're scared, you get really quiet. I wonder why you didn't say anything, all that stuff. So this engine is basically a set of really smart questions that dig into people's shadow triggers, expectations, the way, like you talk about language of love in conscious relating. What's your language of feeling supported in collaboration? What's your language of feeling like we're on it and things are flowing? What's your, just so, because otherwise we just map all our stuff onto people and they're different. Strangely. We are not each other. Maybe one, but we're not each other, and so that's really helped me. And people don't want to do it. They're like, just let's talk about the sexy stuff. And I'm like, no, can you fill this out first before you come to the meeting? It's going to take you 2 hours. Sorry, I want to read through it. Oh, well, here's mine. It's really helped get to a point where you know what, we're just not going to work together in this collaboration, or we really will, but we need to think about this.
Great. Well, I hope is it a link that you can just,
it's a document.
It's a post?
Yeah, it's a document. So maybe I'll turn it into a post.
Okay.
So if you make that something that you can email me about or whatever, my gift to the audience will be to turn that into some kind of post where people can use it in their own conscious collaborations. Because ultimately, one of the things I say, collaboration 101, if you have any ambition at all with your project, you will need to collaborate. It's just the bottom line of the world we live in.
Yeah.
And so becoming masterful at conscious collaboration is one of the great skills of wisdompreneurship.
Great. If you are willing to get that to us, Nick, or even better, if you want to write that up into a simple blog post explaining a little bit about what it is, we'd love to put that on the Wisdompreneurs blog. We'd be really honored to host that if you feel comfortable sharing it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you. Marcia in Denver, Colorado says, thanks for sharing that. Really, the questions really touched her as well. So just wanted to let you know.
Great.
What would you say, Nick? You're taking this to an even deeper level. You are collaborating with the woman you love. You're married to one of your primary collaborators, right? Let's talk about richness and shadow and an opportunity to do your work. Tell us about that.
Yes, that is definitely the trip that keeps on tripping us up, tripping us out. So one of my beliefs in conscious relationship as a start point is that, and I'm very influenced by the work of Harville Hendricks and the Imago relationship work, which I think is literally cracking the code of relationship. So big shout out to his 30-year understanding of what it means to be conscious in relationship. So his kind of work starts with, when we fall in love, to have that chemistry, which it doesn't happen always, but so the chemistry is really I think, this is now me, sort of mystical thing, which is we have the same wound, but we compensated for that wound in the exact opposite way. So for example, my wife and I both were left by our dads around the age of 2, and then didn't really have that dad in our lives that much after that, missed that whole thing, and other stuff happened, same wounds, but she became an innie, like a fleer from things and go inside, and I became an outie, like a, and part of entrepreneurship, obviously, there are more outies in entrepreneurship because it's part of our defense. Happens to work well in business, is just to go out and do stuff and grab stuff. And so even if we weren't doing any entrepreneurship and we were just loving each other and having kids, that in itself is a mind-blowing trip and a heart-breaking trip for her and I to understand each other. And we are also really extreme on this. So I'm a really extreme doer. I can create businesses out of nothing in days. It's the only reason I can run 2 businesses and write books and be on calls like this is because I can get crazy amounts done, right? And usually it's pretty good. She's really profound at being. She can sit with my son for like 6 hours and just be with him, which I honestly can't do. I can do like 20-minute bursts of total presence, And I'm like, I've got to send this blog post, write this cool thing I've been thinking, write it. So I'm not even present for that 20 minutes because I'm thinking about an amazing blog post I'm going to write.
Without being present, right?
Right, exactly. So we've already got challenges to get the being and doing and of course my soul wants the being more, which is why I'm attracted to her. The calmness, the coolness. I talk a lot about sort of Taoism being a blue path and maybe yoga being a red path. So she's got a lot of natural blue in her, and I've got a lot of natural feisty red in me. And so she wants some of the red. She wants more of the doing and the action and the entrepreneurship and that stuff. And I want more of the calm and the presence. So that's already beautiful, but obviously challenging because my outiness triggers her inniness, and her inniness triggers my outiness. So that's give that the context of where we're at. And I'm pretty sure everyone can relate to this in some way because everyone's an innie or an outie predominantly. We all have both, but we tend to favor one. So then we say, okay, let's start this crazy idea business, ripe and ready together. Which I've already tried 2 or 3 times, I should add, in the last 10 years, and failed at. So it was kind of like, for me, how do I create a wisdom media company that's really beautiful, 3.0? And then we kind of had this sense, we may be wrong, that we were kind of brought together to do it together. And it's part of our life's journey to unpick this thing. So that's kind of like the beautiful, glossy version, right, the polish. Digging under, getting the sander out, and what we actually have a lot of the time is a relationship in process and a business that's not as functional as it would be if we were both professionals just meeting on the level of professional. Because as we're going through a breakthrough, we're also digging down into our own psychospiritual stuff, or the deepness of it, which you can do it with a business partner, and they are very intense relationships. I've had 2 very intense business partnerships in my life. But when we got divorced, took a lot of grieving, even though neither of them were particularly bad. It was just like, wow, he's my buddy, he's my business partner, So it's very intense just being in a business relationship, but having that other bit where we leave a meeting and then we're talking about our kids and then we're talking about our own stuff, it's really intense. I wouldn't say it's for everyone. Sometimes none of us are sure it's for us. But we are making it work. And in fact, one of the things we're doing very bravely, and this is so not in my toolbox that it's a breakthrough for me to even consider this, is we are going to slow down on the startup. Slow down on the metrics and the ROIs and the Facebook likes and the blah blah for the next few months, so that we can focus on getting our own being together to a point where we're both feeling empowered and we both, and it may take more longer than it, or it might take shorter. I don't know. We're seeing a coach already to go into that with. But that for me is like already learning from her, which is just steaming ahead and building when the deepest level foundations are not quite in place yet, is not smart, no matter how much I want to see all those metrics popping up and all that stuff happening, right? So that's very real, and that's only really...
Uh-oh, we lost our sound.
We did, we lost Nick.
A bit of autopilot,
There we go.
focus. And that's important, very important.
We had a little freeze in our...
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there you go. I think you're back now.
I'm back. I was just basically saying, to recap, long story short, and you can tell I like to talk, that we are making a bold move for me, which is slowing down on the entrepreneurship to get ourselves right. I've never done it before. I've always been so focused on building that vision. And it feels beautiful to actually say all projects, no matter how big and bold and beautiful, are still just projects. Mm. And they are worthy of commitment and focus and resolve, but they're never the thing itself. And the only thing itself, as we know, is love, connection, empowerment, understanding, compassion, and this is one of, I think, the gnarliest areas of wisdompreneurship is knowing when to take the foot off the gas to focus on the right here, right now, what needs to happen now, the love that needs to be presented now, even if it means that whole day we put out into plan next year's strategy doesn't happen, because we're actually healing each other instead. And we all know what the...
I think that's fascinating, Nick. I think it's fascinating that you're doing that as a couple, but there's so many parallels between just doing that with a business partner or a collaborative partner. Fascinating work you're doing. Are you writing a book about it?
Well, there's notes being taken. I've got another book I'm writing on at the moment. I've got like 15 books in my head, and I just have to. That's another thing about patience for me, is knowing that I don't have to do it all right now, and just learning that the next step and the next step, and remembering that the being and the doing have to be in balance, or I'm out of balance. And if I'm out of balance, it brings that into the world, and that just doesn't help anyone. Least of all me.
I'm just sitting here thinking how rare it is. So Nick, you're partnering. What's your wife's first name?
Alison.
Alison. So you're partnering with Alison. I'm partnering with Alison in a co-founder way, and Susanna has a business partner. Selena has a business partner, Susanna Maida. So it's really interesting that the three of us, and I'm looking at Marcia in the chat room is saying that she's thinking about going into business with her spouse. So, you know, this is a growing edge of people who are moving beyond just talking collaboration the way you're talking about, Nick. Like, sure, I'm collaborative. You can like have a little bit of input into the web design, or, you know, like, here's the program design. You get to like at least look it over before we go teach it tomorrow, right? That's collaboration, right?
Exactly.
And it is on one level, but like to start in this much deeper way that you're talking about, like literally start from the ground up and like, hey, what are your strengths? What are, you know? And like I know in our partnership, Alison Raby has incredibly different strengths and ways of moving in the world. I'm much more of an online, like I'm an introvert, but you put me online and I'm like, I'm having a field day, and she's more of an extrovert. You put her online and she goes, oh, right? But you like put her in a room full of like really high level wisdom people or business people, and she's like in her element, and I'm like, can I go home now, right? Like, you know, we have very, very different skill sets, and how to learn what they are and learn how to leverage them has been, like you said, we've had to slow down, we've ground some gears, but as we're finding the way to play together, it's much stronger than either one of us alone. I'm very much, you know, I used to be an American football player, right? I'm very much a masculine guy, very feminine. Our styles are so different, and how to learn how to bring those together well takes more time. If you're like, looking single bottom line, how do I get dollars in the bank account as fast as possible? Partnering like this is not the way to do it. And yet, I think there really is, I was talking to somebody earlier today, there's a fatigue in the conscious business world where conscious business means you come to my retreat and I have the plan to market consciously or whatever it is, you know, develop your program consciously, and you sit in the chair and I tell you how to do it, and then go talk amongst yourselves. Like, that school of thought feels like it's really dying, and people are really tired. They're hungry in this space, or at least there's a growing number of people who feel really hungry to do it in this deeper way, and if you rush it, it blows up. I mean, just, it's so painful, because people with very different styles trying to like force somebody to be more like they are, like, that does not go well. We come to entrepreneurship because we're cats and we hate being herded, right? And yet, just doing it under one person's way of being feels like that's dying. We have to kind of slow down and learn to integrate the masculine, the feminine, the doing, the being, the offline, the online. People are hungry for more of that richness that can't come when I just leverage my own strengths and then say, this is now a conscious business brand. It feels like there's a growing sector that wants more than that. And it's funny that all of us on this call are doing our journey to like look at that in a very deep way.
Right. I think there's actually, I think both people in the space and customers can sense that you're just, if you're just calling something conscious by having a logo with a lotus blossom.
Somebody meditating, it's conscious, right?
1% of your profit or somewhere. That's not a conscious business to me. And if we can't do it in our meetings and we can't do it in our beings, then we're not really doing it. We're just marketing it. It's like greenwashing with CSR. It's like love washing. You know, you're sort of just covering up. But there's one thing that you said that just was like boom, because this is something I'm just finishing. I wrote an essay on it. I'm trying to shorten it because it's 5,000 words. But I will post it to you guys. It's about slow business rather than fast. You know, Fast Company magazine. I've been part of that whole thing. I've been flying out to the Silicon Valley, and I've been on all that rooftop parties. And one of the challenges is if you mind away all the other stuff, you can do things fast. If you just crush all your own and other people's fears and possibilities and passion, you can get an app to market. You can get the MVP ready in 3 months. You know, all that stuff, right? But I know that doing that thing led me to burnout. It led me to end up actually leaving my own 50-person company without the financial exit, because I just knew I didn't want to do it for a single another day, because I realized it was so not what I wanted to do. And so I urge every entrepreneur on the planet to really do the work on understanding your purpose before you build anything. And I don't mean just having a purpose statement. I mean your embodied sense of being in the world and what your contribution really is. And here's the doozy: purpose, which for me is from the heart, that it comes into the head, it doesn't work at the same time scale as head. And purpose unfolds in a way that is in dynamic interplay with the universe. Like, it creates a challenge for you. You're like, okay, to overcome the challenge, I have to break through, let go of some stuff, work out what I will feel about this and sense into that, you know, all the sort of hippie language that I love. And that stuff is real, right? And it takes time. You can't just do it in the same way you do traditional business, because it doesn't work. Because then you end up, what's the word, glossing over the deep stuff, the big stuff, where your biggest breakthroughs could be. And yes, you might not end up with the project, your app going to #1 on the App Store. Just maybe the reality. But maybe that's the path that your healing is most going to be healed on by not having those results. And so Slow Company is my kind of thing at the moment, is you know, what does it look like? And so I've got this, you know, people talk about unicorns, billion-dollar businesses. I'm talking about ponies.
I love it.
But they get there. They're slow and steady. They just, you know, and if you look at even the statistics, for this article I'm writing this morning, 65% of all new jobs growth in the US was from small or one-person solopreneur type companies, not the unicorns, right? And so, you know, most of us honestly are probably going to end up riding ponies. But there's glory in that. There's beauty in that, particularly if it's a pony that allows you to have a life where you get time to be with your lover, you get time to be with yourself, you get time to be with your kids. We haven't even talked about having 2 small kids and doing this stuff, right? It's another whole trip. I came on this call, my son's sick, he was in the hospital, like, first time I've ever called 911, we had to go to hospital a couple of days ago. It was croup, not, you know, nothing terrible, just a night of, you know, up his airways. So he's sick, he's fragile, and he's like crying because he wanted me to cuddle him, because I've been with him like for 3 days now, which is very rare for me because I'm busy traveling the world, and I have to make these decisions all the time. Is now the time to write that blog, or is now the time to really honor my son's needs? And you know, yeah, that doesn't always, it's not always immediately obvious which is the way forward, let alone what business model you should have, or whether you should pay your collaborators, you know, whatever, all that sort of stuff. So slow company, I think, is certainly my mantra, because it slows me down. But if all of us were less supported each other in being slow and not rushing to go, oh, how many Facebook likes do you got? Oh, yeah, that's really good. You know, if all of us allowed each other to be slow, I think we would all benefit, and I think the world would ultimately.
I'm reminded, I love what you're saying, Nick. I'm reminded I went for a walk once with Soren, the founder of Wisdom 2.0. We were talking, and he said, you can have depth or you can have urgency, but you can't have both.
Like that, yeah.
You can have depth or you can have urgency. And so often, especially in the online world, the urgency, you know, inner marketing and how we language things, like, you know, this will be gone tomorrow, whatever, whether it's manufactured urgency or not.
Yes,
Like, like how do we miss the deep connections when we're living in that urgency world and the larger culture, at least in the US. And I do see it spilling over into, I had a very beautiful conversation with somebody not too long ago about how do we find that space for depth, and what kind of space does depth need, and how do we let that lead in business, as opposed to the urgency to earn money, the urgency to earn esteem, etc. Just so I'm thinking of Soren, I'm loving what you're saying, Nick, and definitely part of my journey, part of the reason I ran away from Westchester County, where I grew up, Martha Stewart, and that whole reality, to northern New Mexico, where they make houses out of earth, you know, in my early 20s. It was like, I didn't know how to be in that sort of incredibly fast-paced, materialistic world. And it's only after more than 20 years in northern New Mexico of like finding roots and finding a way to be on planet Earth that had, you know, one of the reasons I live here, I think it's part of the reason Selena just moved here, is that this is a place where nature and art and soul matter more than money. And there are very few places in the US where as a culture, a whole community says something matters more than money, and we're in agreement what that is, right?
Yeah.
What's good art? People are going to be fighting about that for, like, you know, forever. But the fact that art matters in a place like Santa Fe is part, and it's only after 20 years here, more than 20 years, that I can like step into a larger conversation about wisdom and what's happening on planet Earth and now entrepreneurship, and do it in any sort of integrity. Like, this place has so deeply infused my cells that I almost can't rush beyond a certain point, because I live in the land of manana, right? I live in a place where earth and soul and connection mean more than money, and I cannot live that. And part of that is just this place that we live is so gorgeously attuned to that. And people come here and they're like, what's going on here, especially from other places in the US? And they can feel it. You can literally have, it's in the air, it's in our cells here, it's in the water here. So there's a deep resonance in what you're saying, and I really appreciate how you're articulating it, Nick. It's a conversation we're having in Santa Fe, and that Allison and I and other wisdompreneurs are having a lot. But I love what you're saying, and I particularly love the idea of bringing in the next generation into that possibility of depth more than urgency.
I just want to get on a plane to Santa Fe.
Oh, please do come. We're going to, like, I hate to tell this, but we're going to, like, Santa Fe is going to be, like, where you want to go if you're interested in depth rather than urgency.
It's definitely on our agenda. Boulder, Colorado, and Santa Fe are both on our, because, you know, California is so pricey and fast.
Yeah.
And I need, I mean, not the right word, but I want, deeply yearning to find a community and a ground, an earth. I really affected by earth. And we live in a place in England which is probably the most like that you could have, a town called Lewis. And yet there's still something that's missing the Americanness about it for me. And yeah, I think to have a place in the US that isn't money oriented is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, come visit. Please come visit. We'll treat you to lots of chocolate. I promise. Selena's finding all the good chocolate in Santa Fe.
With your help, Paul.
But I think you just touched upon something that I've not ever articulated, but I felt, which is, to be a conscious entrepreneur, your place is really important. Your community is important. And yes, look, we've all got collaborators all over the world, digital, blah, blah, stuff, Skype, whatever. But the land you're part of. And so I lived in London all my life, apart from LA and New York or whatever. And 3 years ago, we moved out of London to this little village in this sort of arty area. It's only an hour from London, but it's a world apart. And I think part of it was because we needed to let go of all that stuff, city stuff, so we could incubate this new project. But what we've also learned is now's the time probably to leave that incubation period and now to get back into somewhere that's got more access to the flows of people and ideas and projects. And it's the same. I mean, a lot of my work as a wisdom teacher is about this polarity, about this creative tension at the heart of the universe, the heart of being, between masculine and feminine, doing, being, yin, yang, creativity, surrender, entrepreneurship, wisdom. You know, this is like the dominant meme of my life. And part of it's about, you know, where you are, allowing yourself to enjoy things like momentum and growth and all that stuff, and meeting interesting people, but also having this space and time and earth where you can just be and be well and thrive. And you know, to dance between that inner and outer is the trip. And yeah, that's definitely the invitation of wisdompreneurship, is to do that. And one thing I actually had forgot to tell you, a little known fact, I actually met my wife at the very first Wisdom 2.0.
Oh, wow, interesting.
5 or so years ago. And yeah, we both were there kind of randomly, and obviously, or not, obviously. So we have a lot to be grateful for that place, for that earth.
Nice, congratulations. That's a great story. So you and I have sat in the same room, even though I didn't know you were there. I didn't know to look for you, so I'm sorry. I didn't know that it would have been fun to connect with you, but I've really enjoyed connecting. I am aware of the time. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to start to wind us down. I want to say that Marcia in Denver is saying that this is really resonating with her in terms of her past engineering job and what she's trying to work into her business now. So thanks for sharing that, Marcia. And I wanted to just give you a chance, Nick, before we start to wind down. When you look ahead, both in your own business and in the wisdom and entrepreneur movement circles that you're part of, what do you see coming up? What's some highlights that somebody who's wanting to get climb into Nick's, you know, wear his glasses for a little while? What are you seeing that's exciting in your world and also in your personal business and also in the circles you move in?
Wow, that's another beautiful question. So what's exciting for me, I guess, as a wisdom teacher, is coming into my power as that, and to realizing I am old enough and I am everything enough. I don't have to wait till I'm, you know, something else, and be at peace with that and allow that to be. So that's a long journey of even having the hubristic thought I could be a wisdom teacher, whilst also realizing it's just a job. It doesn't need to be made into this thing that's really special. So again, creative tension. Another book coming out. I should mention my book, Switch On. It's available in all great bookshops. And it's about 20 years' work of bringing science and spirituality together. So that's been a lot of fun. Got a new book. Ripe and Ready, building it out, more of it. And I guess I should mention something that I would love anyone who wants to get involved with me to do this. I'm starting a thing called the Switch On MBA, which is basically a conscious leadership and conscious entrepreneurship program. There'll be some real-world versions of it, which we're discussing as collaborations, wisdompreneurs and Ripe and Ready. But also, I'm really keen to do an online version for everyone who just can't show up in California or London or whatever. And really about working through this inner and outer game together over a 12-month period. So you can find that stuff all out on my various websites. And that for me
What's your lead website?
If you want to find out about me, go to nickjankel.com. And if you want to find out about Ripe and Ready stuff, go to ripeandready.com. So those are the two places. But nickjankel.com does go off into pretty much everything. But for me, it's extremely... So I run a consulting business working with big companies on innovation, leadership, and consciousness and whatever. And I run my consumer business, Ripe and Ready, and my own wisdom teaching. And this program, the Switch On MBA, is the first time in my life I will be bringing both together and being able to talk about the deepest spiritual truths, and then how to get your minimum viable product onto the shelf in the next 3 weeks, you know, and be able to dance between the sublime and the ridiculous, and then the ridiculous and the sublime. It's super exciting. Yeah, so that's a great journey for me, is to bring my world and go, this is who I am, and not hide the two, you know, not to hide away from the wisdom people my business stuff, which I love, and not to hide away from the business people my spiritual stuff, which I love. So that's for me a trip. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is actually the first time we've actually got to hang out, but Allison Raby has been telling me, you need to meet Nick, you need to meet Nick, you need to for I don't know how months now. So it's absolutely an honor, and I understand why, Nick, because I'm like, 30 years of wisdom practice and deep roots there, and I love walking into an incubator and say, how come nobody's teaching emotional intelligence? 58% of your success in business is your emotional intelligence factors and not what your product looks like, right?
Right.
And those two conversations, getting fluid in the intersection of the two is so much fun, and I feel that same passion in you. So I really get why Allison's like, you need to be Nick, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
I have to say, I am so glad you guys are doing Wisdompreneurs, because it's one of the things that I see systemically that just has to happen, and to see leaders stepping up and doing something that is a yearning, a need, and everything. And I look forward to being super contributive, involved, serving, receiving, just the whole mix of being in this game together and playing for fun.
Same here, Nick. Send me your questions because we're going to collaborate. I'm not sure how yet, but I better fill out your questions soon.
Do it in advance.
I'm right behind you, Paul.
That's it. It might be a race, right?
And maybe if you're in Santa Fe, Nick, then it'll happen physically as well as otherwise.
Absolutely. I'll be in the US a lot, so we will make it happen.
Fabulous.
Any last thoughts or questions, Selena, on your end?
No, just a profound gratefulness to meet you, Nick. We have so much in common, and hopefully we'll continue those dialogues as we go. And thank you. We're a little bit over the hour, but this has been just gone really fast. So thank you again, Nick. It's been delightful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone who listened in, and please tune in next week. We're here every week at the same time, looking deeply and have an honest conversation.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.